accident in December 2025 on multiple charges, including domestic assault. This inventory of sins grows longer. But to understand the rot, you must go back to the seed, to the very beginning. Before the gold-plated gates and the syndicated laughter, there was just Pause Todd. A man from Westminster, South Carolina, with an ambition that tasted like rust and gasoline. His early career was a frantic scramble through the dirt of entrepreneurship, a series of small ventures that never quite washed the small-town dust from his cuffs. The real money, he discovered, wasn't in creating. It was in acquiring. The anatomy of the fall begins with the first ascent. Pause. Chrisleys Asset Management was the vehicle, a monument built from the wreckage of other people's dreams. The business model was brutal in its simplicity. Feast on the carcasses of the 2008 financial crisis. Buy foreclosed properties from banks for pennies, slap on a coat of cheap paint and expensive-looking fixtures, and flip them to people desperate to believe in the American dream. It was a masterclass in turning misery into marble countertops. For a time, the money flowed like water from a broken main. It was intoxicating. It was the foundation of the empire. Pause. A foundation of sand. Because the truth, buried under years of reality television and curated perfection, is that the first Pause Chrisleys empire had already collapsed before a single camera ever rolled. The man who would sell himself to the world as the patriarch of perfection, the self-made millionaire, filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy in Pause 2012. He carried over $49 million in debt. The dream was already a ghost. How does a man drowning in $49 million of debt sell a show about his fabulous wealth? You don't. You sell a fiction, a beautiful, intoxicating lie. Chrisleys Knows Best was never a documentary. It was a preemptive alibi. A life raft constructed from scripts and studio lights, launched from the deck of a sinking ship. The persona of the patriarch of perfection was a character, forged in the fires of financial desperation. Every witty retort, every lesson on fiscal responsibility was a performance. A desperate incantation to ward off the collectors at the door. The show was not a reflection of their lifestyle. It was the engine for it. A glittering televised Ponzi scheme where the only investors were the viewers. The logic was a snake eating its own tail. The show required a set, and the set was their life. To maintain the illusion of wealth for the cameras, they had to spend money they didn't have. This created a demand for more loans, more credit, more creativity with the paperwork. The show became a tool, a shimmering business card presented to bankers to prove a solvency that was pure fantasy. The fatal mistake was not the initial lie. The fatal mistake was starting to believe it. They forgot the cameras were props and began to think the applause was real. The show wasn't a vehicle for their lifestyle. Pause. It was the murder weapon. The weapon was sophisticated. It was also loud. The noise attracted attention not from fans, but from the quiet, methodical men at the Georgia Department of Revenue. The first investigation wasn't a federal crusade. It was a local affair, a matter of state taxes that seemed almost pedestrian, an administrative headache. But for the Pause Chrisleys, it was the first sign of the curse of being seen. The state auditors were not assassins. They were archaeologists, digging through the digital landfill of the Pause Chrisleys finances. They found a curious absence of residency. For years, Todd had claimed Florida as his home, a state with no income tax, a convenient fiction. His life, his show, his children's schools, all were rooted in Georgia soil. The auditors presented a bill for nearly $2 million in unpaid state taxes, penalties, and interest. It was a demand letter that read like a preliminary indictment. This was the anatomy of the fall, Chapter 1, The Lie of Geography. A simple, almost elegant deception that saved a few percentage points, but cost them everything. The family's betrayal, whispered about in later years, began here. A tip from a disaffected source, a digital breadcrumb left for the hunters to find. Pause. The call came from inside the house. The state's findings were merely the appetizer. The main course was served by the federal government. When the FBI took an interest, they weren't looking for tax discrepancies. They were hunting for ghosts. The ghosts of banks that no longer existed and the phantom wealth used to secure $30 million in loans. This is where the true secret evidence resides. Not in a vault, but in sent folders and hard drives. The prosecution's case was built on a practice they called scrapbooking, a grotesque term for financial forgery. Todd's business partner, Mark Braddock, would testify that they would physically cut and paste numbers from old legitimate documents onto new forms, creating a collage of lies. A financial statement showing $4 million in an account would, with a little digital surgery, show $77 million. Mark Braddock, the jilted partner, became the state's star witness, the keeper of the digital tomb. He turned over the company's entire email server, a complete inventory of sins. Every falsified document, every panicked exchange, every instruction to create wealth from thin air. It was a level of deception that was both breathtakingly audacious and tragically amateurish. They were building a financial empire on a foundation of photocopied paper and glue. The evidence was not just a smoking gun. It was the blueprints for the entire munitions factory. This inventory of sins, however, was not merely a business document. It was a personal diary. Mark Braddock's relationship with Todd Chrisley was a complex knot of business, friendship, and according to Braddock's own testimony, a brief, obsessive affair. A narrative Todd's legal team painted as the bitter fantasy of a scorned blackmailer. The truth became irrelevant. What mattered was that Braddock felt betrayed first. The fatal mistake was not the fraud itself, but believing the man who helped you commit it would remain silent forever. Loyalty, it turned out, could not be financed with phantom funds. Then came the betrayal from within the bloodline, a wound far deeper than any business partner could inflict. While Braddock supplied the digital coffin, Todd's eldest daughter, Lindsay, was accused of helping the state nail it shut. The details are a murky swamp of family animosity, but the accusation was clear. She had communicated with tax officials. For Todd, a man who built his brand on patriarchal control, this was the ultimate act of treason, a public shaming orchestrated by his own flesh and blood. The personal toll was an audit of the soul. Every relationship reevaluated, every past kindness scrutinized as a potential motive for a future betrayal. The Chrisley empire wasn't just financially bankrupt, it was emotionally insolvent. Then, a plot twist, even a reality show producer would find too audacious. A phone call not from a lawyer, but from a former president. The May 2025 presidential pardon was less a legal proceeding and more a deus ex machina, a sudden, jarring intervention that rewrote the final act. Pause. Todd and pause. Julie Chrisley walked free from their respective prisons, blinking in the sunlight. The gates swung open. It looked like a story of redemption. A miracle. But the fine print on a miracle is always brutal. The pardon was a key, but it only unlocked one door. Behind it was another colder prison. The pardon erased their time, but it could not erase the verdict of the accountants. The restitution stood, a monument to their ambition carved in granite. $17.8 million. Pause. A debt that breathes, a number that follows them from the morning news to the sleepless nights. Their net worth became a black hole. An estimated negative, pause, 18 million. This is the true sentence. Not the years they might have served, but the years they will spend clawing their way back from a financial abyss. This is the anatomy of their broken destiny. To be pardoned by the most powerful office in the world, yet remain shackled to a number on a ledger. This is the true anatomy of poverty. Not the lack of bread, but the loss of altitude. The gilded cages were sold for scrap. The sprawling mansions, once stages for a televised fantasy, are now just ghosts on a Zillow listing. Their new reality is a landscape of rented walls and downsized ambitions. A world where every price tag is a quiet accusation. The solitude is the most brutal part of the sentence. It is a silence heavier than concrete, settling in the space once filled by producers, stylists, and fawning admirers. The phones that once burned with offers now sit cold. Pause. This is the exile, not from a country, but from a status. The new reality show is not a chronicle of redemption. It is a distress signal, disguised as content, a desperate attempt to monetize the very ruins they created, hoping the audience will pay to watch them sift through the rubble of their own lives. The final audit is not financial, it is genealogical. The ultimate legacy of Todd and Julie Chrisley is not a brand, but a bruise passed down to their children. This is the tarnished will. A name so radioactive that their own blood, Lindsay, publicly amputated it from her own identity, seeking what she called pause, peace. It is a peace they can never offer. Their son Kyle becomes another statistic, another headline confirming the rot beneath the floorboards. Each child is a living testament to the collateral damage of ambition. They are the inheritors of nothing but a public scandal and a complex trauma that will play out for another generation. The great irony is that Chrisley knows best was the one truth they never grasped. The verdict is this. They built a shimmering empire of lies for the cameras, and in the process, they handed their own children the bill. Pause. A debt that can never be repaid.